Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker for the day, Mr. Andrew Dent. Andrew is the founder and group CEO of Family Traveller and has over 20 years of marketing and publishing experience. He is the former marketing manager for Harrods and was head of promotions at News Corporation, now News UK in London. He has worked with many of the most famous brands and franchises in the world. He has a wealth of experience and contacts in the digital media, travel, marketing and publishing businesses, both in the United Kingdom and globally. Andrew founded and launched Family Traveller in May 2013 in the UK. He has since overseen the brand's launch in Germany in 2016 and more recently in the United States last year in 2017. Andrew manages a team of 50 people globally and remains the driving force behind the business today. Today, Andrew is here to tell his story about Family Traveller's international expansion. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. Andrew Dent. Welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Shitra, for the invitation to be here today. Absolutely delighted to do so. I'll try and get my slides up here. Here we go. I'm going to try and distill what's effectively been a 12-month project into 15 minutes about how we expanded our brand into the United States in about September of last year. But first, a little bit about me. We'll get my accent out the way so that people don't have to worry about where I'm from, and then you can concentrate on what I say. I grew up here. I grew up in a country with lots of these, if anyone can start guessing. New Zealand. Good. I don't even have to get to the end. Some people like that, and a fantastic rugby team like that also. Exactly. So I grew up in New Zealand, but spent the last 20 years in the UK. As was mentioned earlier, I started my work here, which is a department store in central London, where I was ultimately the head of the marketing team. I then ended up working here, which is a big media operation in the United Kingdom owned by Rupert Murdoch. Whilst I was working at Harrods, this happened, which was clearly an absolute tragedy, but as a very young head of a marketing and PR team, it was an incredibly challenging experience and retrospectively a huge learning curve. Whilst I was working at the Times, this happened. I'm not trying to be a professor of doom, and I'm sure this event's going to be absolutely fine today. But what was absolutely incredible was being in a global media company when an event, which is probably the seminal news event of our generation, happened. It was 1 p.m. in London. We were all hard at work on other things which were nowhere near as meaningful as this. And to watch an operation and a business go into overdrive to deal with a news event of this magnitude was quite stunning. But both of those events and both of those brands gave me a huge amount of experience and a huge amount of network and a huge amount of confidence to go on and launch my own business. It was whilst I was at the Times that I started to get exposed to the whole concept of family travel. My peers, my friends, my family all starting to travel with kids and starting to get incredibly stressed out about it. There's many more variables to take into account. Family travel there's just much more at stake, emotionally, because it's very precious time with your kids, but also financially, because it's a big-ticket item. And as a marketeer, sat in a media company, I started to look at the whole space around family-centric travel in the media landscape. And there was, and there is today, and many of you in the room, a lot of mommy bloggers in that space who all are doing fantastic work, but don't necessarily have the scale to be able to operate with some of the larger leisure brands. And equally, there was the mainstream media, of which I was in, which touched on family travel from time to time, but wasn't focused on it. So in May 2013, I took the leap. I left my very comfortable job in a well-known media company and launched a multi-platform content brand all around family-centric travel. We were, as I say, multi-platform. We had a magazine, we had a website, we had social media, and we had email database, even at that time. We were, in those days, probably 90% of print business in terms of revenue. We are now 95% a digital business in the space of 4.5 years. Our mission then and now is to become the global authority around all things to do with family-centric travel. Provide content, inspiration, tips, advice, and actually right now we're sort of migrating into a booking engine where we have a very curated and highly relevant selection of hotels on our site that consumers can book from. The size of the market, which is why we entered into the space, and I'm sure why many of us are all in the room today. Family-centric travel is plus or minus 30% of the entire travel industry. That's a multi-hundred billion pound niche, if you can call something which is multi-hundred billion anything a niche. Family-centric travel is one of the, if not the fastest growing part of the travel industry, led by a couple of key drivers, one of which is this real explosion in multi-generational travel. So our parents' generation are healthier, wealthier, wanting to participate more in family holidays, so that's a big driver. Skip generation travel, where the grandparents are taking the grandkids. And I was actually just told by my editor in London yesterday, or the day before, about 4-generation travel, which is, a real thing now as well. Another big driver around family-centric travel is around the experiential nature of travel. It's no longer good enough, cool enough, just to say we're going to Barbados to lie on a beach or jump around in a pool for a week or two. Parents want to give their kids more, be that cultural, educational, whatever those experiences are. And all that puts together is really driving family-centric travel as a key part of conversation in the travel industry. The industry's onto it, whether it be Forbes on the left-hand side, Google, Travel Weekly in the trade. Family-centric travel is a real discussion, and every element of the travel industry is sharpening their pencil in this space. Just so happens that we've been in it for 4 or 5 years, and we hope that we've got a bit of a head start. Our primary audience is an affluent mum. Mum tends to be the decision maker when it comes to 80-90% of what the household income is spent on, but also she tends to serve as the family travel agent. It is becoming more and more a collaborative process, and I think the kids are actually key drivers a lot of times in the vacation planning as well. But our target audience is that, and on our digital platforms, we will see 70 to 75% of our traffic will be females 25 to 50. However, you have to tread a little bit carefully. I've started being in the US an awful lot now, and I go to meetings in fancy PR departments all over New York City, and I cut to the chase about how I describe our audience. But what you must not do in a fancy New York PR agency is call this demographic a yummy mummy. I was saying that in a New York, and literally the room went quiet. My own staff, looked at me in horror and said, "How can you use such a term?" And these very well-groomed New York PR guys looked at me and went, "Oh my God, who is this guy?" I go back to my New Zealand heritage and my sort of, New Zealand rugby playing and sort of do that. What you also can't do, because I quickly sort of moved away from yummy mummy and went, well, okay, what about that? Do not call them soccer moms. That is not good either, because that would suggest that all they do is drive around picking up their kids from soccer. So culturally, you need to be very, very careful when you start moving into new territories, even ones in theory, as aligned as the US is to the UK. But an affluent mum is where I stick, and it's kind of safe for the time being. So let's talk a little bit about how we launched in the US. I think the key thing is that we'd been going for 4 or 5 years in the UK. We'd made a ton of mistakes. We'd honed our content, we'd honed our product, we'd honed our brand. We'd increased our talent year upon year. As our revenues grew, we could invest in better and more people. And we also did a dummy run. I can't really call it a dummy run because it's now a significant pillar of our business, but we launched familytraveler.de in Germany first. Because when you look at a market the size of the US, you best be ready if you're going to go there, because it will swallow you up and throw you out if you don't know what you're doing. But being a predominantly digital business, and we launched with our website first, so we launched our website in September of 2017. Our US magazine only came out in March of 2018, so we went digital first so we could have a low footprint in terms of that. But we used exactly the same back end, exactly the same front end in terms of the CMS and all of the rest of it from there. We leveraged a lot of our UK staff from technology development content, and we sort of went in there. Another thing that we did, and it's why I was so delighted to be here today, was we partnered with a US trade association called the Family Travel Association. That relationship started in this very room 12 months ago. A colleague of mine was at this event a year ago, came back to London and said, "Hey, Andrew, you've got to meet this guy that founded the Family Travel Association. He's great, and he can help us enter the US." And by partnering with these guys, it gave us some automatic credibility. It gave us some automatic network. And that started here 12 months ago. So I urge you to do everything you can to network today, because these things really help and work. And the catalyst for us going into the US was founded here. So, Chitra, that's amazing. We utilized a lot of our content. When we went into Germany, we actually pretty much used all of our content, because Germans travel to very similar places than the UK. So we had a lot of content about Spain and Turkey and Greece and what have you. And when we went into Germany, we could just translate the content, and it didn't affect us with duplicate content on Google. But what we did in the US, because they sort of speak English, we had some problems. So we had to repurpose all of our existing content, and with the spelling, with the call to action. So when a fact box had flights with BA, that had to be changed to United, and so on and so forth. But we also had to do a massive content program to get a bunch of stuff about destinations we didn't have on our UK site. So the US are very, they're quite, insular in terms of where they travel. We needed a lot of content about the Caribbean, as they call it. We needed a lot of content about Mexico. We needed content about Hawaii. We needed a lot of content about the US states that we didn't have. So we had to go about a mass content creation program, and we got a huge bunch of folks like yourselves to start writing content for us and uploading it into our CMS. But you had to have a minimum viable product so that when somebody from the US came to our site, there was enough depth and there was enough relevancy there to make it look credible. So, content was key, just to the point that you were making earlier. We hired top local talent, and I think that's really important. You need local talent in the market to give you credibility, to open those doors. It's very different from me trying to get into a meeting in New York versus someone who's got a 10, 12-year, 20-year relationship. Again, because we weren't a total startup, we'd been going for 4 or 5 years in the UK, we had something to show. We had a website running, we had client relations, we had a physical magazine that we could show. I managed to secure, first of all, this lady, Laura Begley-Bloom, who is an absolutely fantastic travel professional. She was the deputy editor of Travel and Leisure magazine, which is a powerhouse brand in the US, 800,000 circulation. She was then latterly head of travel for Yahoo, which was the world's largest travel website at the time. So to secure her, it was through my network, it was through some of the talk and credibility of what we'd done before. But Laura opened the door to all of those aforementioned fancy New York PR travel firms for us, as well as advertisers, and got us going quickly. She also brought on Jill Stone, who is again a 15, 20-year veteran of the US travel scene in terms of commercial, been working for Time Inc. across all of their American Express travel titles and the rest. So top local talent is really key. All of that meant that within the US, we managed to be break even from day one. And that was a lot to do with this slide. So these are a selection of our UK advertisers. And we work with our advertisers in all sorts of different ways. Most of our advertisers work with us in what we call a blended package. So they'll take a little bit of print, a little bit of data, some display advertising, sponsored content, social posts, whatever it may be. But what you'll notice from this selection is that a lot of our advertisers are truly global. And what we were able to do when we went to the US was to bring on a significant number of them from day one. And it reminds me of a funny story when I was, shaking my little tin can around New York City streets as we were getting ready to launch. I went in for a meeting with the CMO of a tour operator called Abercrombie & Kent, who operated here in Europe. And I went into that meeting, and the lady said to me, "Andrew, whatever you're selling, I'm buying it." Now, that doesn't happen to me very often. I don't think it happens to many people. And I said, "Okay, well, why?" And she said, "Well, I've just put the phone down to my opposite number in the UK who have used your site for the last 4 years, and she's had great results, and therefore we're in to support you on your US launch." So being able to bring all of these brands with us as we move into new territories and as we will continue to open new territories, having case studies from these guys is great. I just pop past. So our sort of reach now is growing. It's growing about 10% a month at the moment. We're getting up towards 1 million monthly unique visitors on our site. It's now nearly 1 million on social as well. Magazines. Our engagement is high. Our pages per session. Our content is cute kids and beautiful destinations. It's not rocket science. And frankly, if you can't make that work on social, you should pack up and go home. Facebook likes us because the stuff that goes into our feed is very emotive. It's very, it captures people when they're in the feed. And we do sort of fun stuff like 11 lighthouses you can sleep in, or 10 beaches you wouldn't believe are in the UK, or whatever it may be. So we can drive a very low cost per click from Facebook to drive our traffic as and when we require it. What's been interesting is that the metrics that we use, both in the UK, Germany, and in the US, we utilize Google and we utilize Facebook, and like most of you in the room do, I guess. And we found actually that the metrics translate almost identically through different territories. And whilst those guys are difficult to deal with and have too much control, it does enable you to very quickly move into new markets using the same techniques that you've learned. US now, seen as we're concentrating on the US as a percentage of our business, it's a crazy, crazy market. There are 350 million people there. It is generally considered to be 8 times the size of the UK economy, about the same size as the European market, but one language, one way to get to that market from there. The US in 2018 will be between 40 and 50% of our entire business from a standing start, pretty much. And 2019 it will be 50%, but we'll also have turned on Asia by that point, so it'll be even a bigger number. And what it's driven by is, up here, the top right, is deal size. So our average deal size that we do with an advertiser in the UK is about £3,500. Our average deal size in the US is $15,000. Now, as marketeers in the room will know, it takes pretty much as much effort to source and deliver and execute on a 15 grand deal as it does on a 3 grand deal. So why not spend more of your time and energy where the deal size is 8x? To give a couple of live examples that just happened in the last week, Visit Florida, one of our good clients, just signed off something for Q2, so some activity for May. In the UK, 20,000 sterling, nice. In the US, for April only, so a 1-month campaign on our US site with Visit Florida, $55,000. Digital only. That's 100% digital spend, that Visit Florida US money. Same client, different marketing teams within the client, but just the scale of the market and the opportunity was driving it. Family Traveller Awards, I don't know if any of you have ever been to them, but we're now in our 4th year in the UK. Avis was our headline sponsor in the UK last year, paying 25,000 sterling for that. We just did the deal for the inaugural Family Traveller Awards in the US at $100,000 plus. So same thing, same execution, same involvement, just bigger numbers going on. But it's tough. It's really tough. And this kid is roughly how I feel most of the time when I'm thinking about how I handle the US. What's tough about it is splitting your management time. I'm a sole founder rather than a co-founder. And any of you out there looking to launch businesses, I would highly recommend considering a co-founder. Maybe not when you exit. It's kind of nice being a sole founder when you exit because you get to keep it all. But generally speaking, I wish if I'd done all of this again, I'd have a co-founder. Because splitting your time between the UK and the US is tough. And it's actually tough on the efficiency. When I'm in New York, the UK office comes off 20% in terms of its performance. When I'm in London, the US guys feel a little bit left behind and their performance goes down. There's a lot of travel. And that's not just puddle jumping between London and New York, which I've got down to a fine art now, but also domestic US travel. If anybody wants to blow out the concept of the glamour of travel, do a ton of US domestic travel. It sucks. It is the most depressing. Airports, airlines, it's just horrible. But it's a big place, and you might have a client in Kansas City, you might have a client in LA, you might have a client in Colorado. You got to go see him, and it's not fun at all. Long working hours. You know, you must, and I was talking to Chitra about this last night, if you do plan a UK into US expansion, you must be on the East Coast. If you're on the West Coast, you will die in terms of trying to keep up with those time zones. When I'm in New York, I will wake up at 5 a.m., I will work with London for 4 hours, and then I'll go into the US office, and I'll work there until 7 p.m., and then probably an event till 9 p.m., and then you go to bed and you start all over again. So it's kind of tough, but the rewards can be worth it. Staff are expensive. They're good. They're very, very good. To reach the top of whatever your chosen industry is in New York City or Los Angeles or wherever it may be, you are good. And I am constantly surprised and inspired by my US team. But they're expensive. Anywhere between 1.5 and 2x London for the exact same skill set. And there's a ton of dodgy labor laws and visas and all that sort of stuff and healthcare that I don't even want to get into. Media agencies, we do a lot of our deals in the UK client direct, so we will know the marketing director of Bermuda Tourism or Snow and Rock or whoever our client is. We'll go and see them. In the US, it just doesn't happen like that. And I'll give you a real example. I was with the CMO of the Bermuda Tourism Board in New York, and she was explaining to me, so we do a deal with them in London, we will talk directly to the Bermuda Tourism Office and we'll get that deal done. But in the US, we will be pushed into their media agency and we'll have to go through all of the hoops that are involved with that. Reason being is that in the UK, that marketing team will be approached probably, or will have the opportunity to work with about 10 to 20 media partners in a year that are relevant for them in that UK space. In the US, the CMO of the Bermuda Tourism Board is being approached by roughly 1,200 media owners who've all said, oh, by the way, I've got an editorial page about something in Bermuda, and would you mind sticking an ad next to it? They can't cope with that level of, how do I put it politely, approaches from media companies, so they need to farm it all out to media agencies to handle that volume. And that puts us into the process of having to deal with all of those guys, and don't know how much experience you've got with that. Other thing about the US, everything's big. It is big. So if you're going to go there, make sure you're tooled up in your wallet as much as anything else, but also, in terms of, your time and your investment and everything you go there. So it is a fantastic market. It's one that you should all look at. We've been delighted with the response we've had. And again, we were talking over dinner last night. What is surprising for a country of the size of the US is actually the creative bar is pretty low. So our US magazine, which sadly you haven't got in your goodie bags, you've got our UK one, but our US magazine was so well received in the last 4 weeks because it looks good. And it's done nicely, and it doesn't have loads of ads and things falling out of it and whatever else that they have in the US. And for a country that size and the level of budgets they have, you would be surprised with what we all do here in Europe, how creatively we can challenge them, absolutely. I wanted to just finish with a sort of funny story about moving into the US that we had. I don't know if anyone can see the difference between these two words. Americans can't spell. We have a couple of Americans in the front row, I apologize, but they can't spell. And we owned familytraveler.com, spelled correctly. Familytraveler1l.com, we didn't own. It was actually not being used. It was being used as a redirect, but it was owned by a little company called TripAdvisor, which I see as a double-edged sword. It could be a nice exit, before too long. They've already owned the URL. But also, they at some point they can see what we're doing and maybe turn it on. Anyway, what I had to do was I had to be confident that what we're doing is creating a global brand here. I also wanted the domain authority of familytraveler.com and the SEO juice that we'd created from 4 years in the UK to materialize straight away in the US to get us that SEO traffic to build from there. So, in the end, we're building this global brand. We went with familytraveler.com. And frankly, it's sort of working to our advantage. The Britishness, Europeanness, Americans still like it. It seems kind of chic, a little bit sophisticated, whatever you may be. Half of them don't notice. More than half of them don't notice. I literally went onto the streets outside our office in Manhattan and asked about 20 passing people, said, how do you spell traveler? How do you spell traveler? They thought I was kind of mad. But the point was that not many of them really knew. But also, like most of you in this room, we're running a digital business predominantly. And only about 3% of our traffic comes through the homepage. People actually typing in what your URL is into the search bar. Most of our traffic is coming from SEO or from social or from email and going directly deep linked into the content. So it didn't particularly matter. But, these are the things that you have to think about and challenge when you move into a new market. So I've done it with 2 minutes to spare, so that's pretty good, which means that nobody can have too many long and tricky questions. But thanks for listening, and thanks for sharing at Family Traveller. And if anyone would like to talk about how we can work together, I'd love to do that. And thanks, as I said, this whole project that we talked about today was born here. So it was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That was amazing. And congratulations on breaking the States. I mean, one of the things that I wrote down during it was the Spice Girls and Take That didn't quite manage to get there, but you did. So that's wonderful. I think some of the takeaways that I took from that was definitely the foundation before expansion. So that how you had fine-tuned your business in a market that you knew very, very well. And then you use that as a springboard to launch into a bigger market. So that's definitely something that I took from that. And I'm sure other people in the room did as well. So well done. And then the other thing I'm sure that a lot of you took from it, particularly the bloggers in the room, was about the content and about the content being king and hiring local talent and the expertise in that area. And that's certainly what made my ears kind of stand up, and I'm sure others in the room. Does anybody have any questions for Andrew?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So, Andrew, your background, it was purely marketing and publishing, and now your role probably encompasses a lot more than that. It sounds like you're going on sales visits. Like, were there new skills that you needed to learn as a founder when you started this?
Absolutely. I made it all up as I've gone along. And I think I say that to my own team, a lot about that, is that, none of us have done this before. None of us have taken a business from here to here. And, we're learning as we go along. We actually flipped over our website just yesterday. We put a new front end skin on it. And I've got many members of my team who are real perfectionists, and that's great. But I actually sent them all a quote, yesterday morning as I was on my way to Heathrow at 6 a.m, saying, that don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Sometimes, to your point, you've got to get on with it and get into it. As a founder, as a CEO, you have to do everything. And I've had every possible thing thrown at me from, the investment side of it, from, the tax side of it, from hiring and firing, from being sued, from all sorts of incredible things that you have to do. You have to, for the first time, work out what your maternity package is. You have to, work out all of these incredible things that you had no idea. I mean, what I love doing is going out and meeting clients. That's where I, excel and what I enjoy doing. What I have had to learn is how to crunch numbers. Investor relations. We have the British government as one of our investors. We have venture capital funding in our business. These are all things that I had never done before. So if you're going to be a founder, a CEO, get ready to learn, but get ready to, wing it a little bit as well.
Great. Anybody else?
What's the future for that print magazine?
I thought we wouldn't have one by this time. So the magazine, just to put into perspective, I'd sat at the Times newspaper for 6 years watching our print circulation do that. So when I launched my own business, the magazine for us, we always had it created as a break-even pillar of our business. We had never put any forecast to make a profit from the magazine, but it was there as a consumer confidence, advertiser confidence, brand building exercise. Because I think if you just launch another website, then you are another website. With a magazine, we had something tangible. And with a magazine, our distribution strategy was very different. We don't sell it, at the newsstand. We did a deal when we first launched with a company called Ocado, which is a online grocer in the UK. And it was a clever deal whereby we segmented. We picked 20 trigger items, so Ella's Kitchen, Johnson & Johnson's kids shampoo, whatever it was. Any order that had one of those items got a free copy of our magazine on top, straight into the home of the yummy mummy. I can say it in this audience. So, the magazine for us...
Brave.
the magazine for us, ironically, is profitable now, which is kind of annoying because I thought we could have phased it out by now. It's been a really profitable part of our US business, and I think it plays a role. It does play a role. And when I say we don't sell it, we now actually sell it in 296 Waitrose stores and 400 Sainsbury's stores in the UK. Out now if you want to go buy one. And it's brand recognition.
Certain markets still love print. They still love to know that was the backbone of your business, that you started in print and now you've gone into digital. And I think it kind of gives some credibility, but it also gives some dimension to your business.
I think it does. It gives credibility, dimension. It's the first point of entry for a lot of our advertisers. They see it first, and whilst they may spend 70% of their media money with us digitally, they still like to be a part of it. So it's with us for the time being.
I'm going to have to wrap up this session, but Andrew will be
One
taking
quick question.
questions over the coffee break.
Okay.
Is
fine.
that okay?
Yes, sure.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Just I thought it would keep us on time and keep everything moving. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.